Hello everyone and welcome back to Shadow Man's Stories. I can picture some of you already in bed, maybe some of you just getting home from work. Wherever you are, whatever time it is, I'm glad you're here. If this helps you relax or sleep, please like and subscribe. It means a lot. Now, let's get you comfortable and I'll tell you tonight's story. My name is Diana Blackthorne and I've been a park ranger for 9 years. I'm telling you this story because I need someone to know what really happened in those mountains. What I saw up there changed everything I thought I knew about the world. It was September 1988 when everything started. I was working the Dolly Sods area in West Virginia's Monongahela National Forest. Most people don't know about Dolly Sods. It's this high plateau covered in open meadows and ancient rocks that look like they came from another planet. During World War II, they used to test explosives up there. TNT factories. Some folks say those explosions opened something they shouldn't have. I was 31 then, raising my son Tommy alone after my husband died in a mining accident 3 years before. The ranger job wasn't much money, but it came with benefits and a small house. Tommy was 12 and smart as a whip, always asking questions about the birds I studied. I specialized in night birds, owls, nighthawks, anything that flew in the dark. Been cataloging species for the federal program for years. The trouble started when 3 different hikers came to my station in 1 week, all telling the same impossible story. A massive bird with glowing red eyes, wings 15 feet across, flying silent as death through the forest. "Ma'am, I know how this sounds," said Janet Morrison, a school teacher from Pittsburgh. She sat in my office, hands shaking as she held her coffee cup. But this thing wasn't natural. It looked at me, and I swear it saw right into my soul. I'd heard stories like this before. Every few years, someone spots a sandhill crane during migration and thinks they've seen a monster. These birds are 6 feet tall with 7-foot wingspans. In dim light, they can look pretty scary. Sandhill cranes migrate through here, I told her gently. They're huge birds, and their eyes can reflect light in strange ways. Janet shook her head. This wasn't a crane. It had a human shape to its body, and those eyes, they glowed like red coals. The other 2 hikers told me the exact same thing. Same location, same description. That got my attention. 3 separate people don't usually hallucinate the same creature. What really worried me was the electronics. All 3 hikers said their equipment went crazy near the sighting area, compasses spinning, radios giving off static, camera flashes not working right. One guy's digital watch just stopped. My supervisor, Bob Collins, called me into his office on a Friday morning. "Diana, we need this cleared up before tourist season picks up. Last thing we need is panic over some giant bird." "I'll head up there this weekend," I said. "Do a proper wildlife survey." Bob nodded. "Take whatever equipment you need, but keep this quiet. If word gets out that we've got some kind of monster up there, we'll have every crazy person in 3 states camping in our forest." I packed my gear that evening. Night vision scope, camera with telephoto lens, camping equipment, and my portable weather station. The forecast showed clear skies, which was perfect for night observation. Tommy helped me load the truck. "Mom, what if you really do find something weird up there?" "Then I'll study it, take pictures, and figure out what it really is," I said, ruffling his hair. "Probably just a big bird that got lost." But driving up the mountain road that evening, I felt uneasy in a way I couldn't explain. The trees seemed too quiet. Even the usual night sounds, crickets, tree frogs, distant owls, were missing. It was like the whole forest was holding its breath. I set up camp near Beaver Dam Road, about 2 miles from where all 3 sightings happened. The area was familiar to me. I'd been studying the local owl population here for 2 years. So my trained peregrine falcon, Scout, always loved flying these meadows. But when I released Scout for his evening hunt, something strange happened. He flew about 50 yards toward the sighting area, then wheeled around and came straight back to me, landing on my glove with his feathers all puffed up. In 10 years of working with him, I'd never seen Scout refuse to hunt in good territory. I tried again, same thing. Scout would not fly toward that part of the forest. "What's got you spooked, boy?" I whispered. But he just tucked his head under his wing. As darkness fell, I settled in with my night vision scope to watch the meadow where all three hikers had their encounter. The place felt wrong somehow. Too quiet. Too empty. Even with my scope, I couldn't spot any of the usual night creatures that should have been moving around. That's when I noticed my equipment acting up. The digital thermometer kept showing impossible readings, jumping from 60 degrees to 30, then up to 80. My portable radio hissed with static even though the weather was clear. The compass needle spun slowly in circles. I'd been doing this job for 9 years. I knew the difference between equipment malfunction and something else entirely. This was something else. Around midnight, I heard it, a sound like massive wings beating the air, but completely silent. You know how that doesn't make sense, but that's exactly what it was. The feeling of giant wings without any actual sound. I raised my night vision scope and scanned the tree line across the meadow. And that's when I saw my first shadow. It was just a shape at first, darker than the darkness around it, moving along the edge of the forest about 300 yards away. Through the night scope, I could see it was huge, much bigger than any bird that belonged in these mountains. My hands started shaking as I tried to keep the scope steady. The thing moved with a strange, flowing motion, sometimes on the ground, sometimes seeming to float just above it. I couldn't make out details, just this enormous dark shape that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Then it stopped. I held my breath, not moving a muscle. Through the scope, I could see it had turned in my direction. And that's when I saw the eyes. 2 red points of light, glowing like embers in the darkness. They weren't reflecting my equipment or some distant light source. They were glowing from within, pulsing slightly like a slow heartbeat. Those eyes stared directly at me across that meadow. Not searching, not looking around, staring right at me, like it knew exactly where I was hiding. I don't know how long we stared at each other. Could have been seconds or minutes. Time felt thick and strange. Then, without any warning, the thing simply wasn't there anymore. One moment I was looking at it through my scope, the next moment I was looking at empty forest. I stayed frozen in position for another hour, scanning back and forth, but it was gone. When I finally lowered the scope, my whole body was shaking. I tried to tell myself it was just adrenaline, just the shock of seeing something unexpected. But deep down, I knew I'd just encountered something that shouldn't exist. I packed up my equipment and headed home. I needed time to think, to process what I'd seen, and I needed to do some research. The next morning, I drove to the library in Elkins and spent hours going through old newspapers and local history books. What I found made my blood run cold. The sightings went back decades. Always the same description. Massive winged creature, glowing red eyes, appears before disasters. The most famous reports came from Point Pleasant, about 2 hours south, where a creature called the Mothman terrorized residents in the 1960s before the Silver Bridge collapsed, killing 46 people. But there were older stories, too. Cherokee legends about thunderbird spirits that emerged during times of great danger, warnings of disaster, guardians from another world. I found a 1952 newspaper article about a coal mine explosion near Dolly Sods. 3 days before the blast that killed 12 miners, a local hunter reported seeing a giant moth-like creature with burning red eyes in the exact area where I'd had my sighting. My scientific mind wanted to dismiss all this as coincidence and folklore. But my gut knew better. I'd seen those eyes. I'd felt that presence. That evening I called my sister Mary, who lived in Charleston. She watched Tommy whenever I had to work overnight shifts. "Mary, I need you to keep Tommy for a few days, maybe a week." "Diana, what's wrong? You sound scared." I almost told her everything. But how do you explain that you've seen something that might be supernatural without sounding crazy? "Just some dangerous wildlife up in my sector. I need to investigate without worrying about Tommy's safety." Mary agreed, though I could hear the concern in her voice. Tommy wasn't happy about it either, but he knew my work sometimes took me to dangerous places. The next night, I went back to Dolly Sods. This time I came prepared with more equipment, multiple cameras, extra batteries, my grandfather's old compass that didn't use electronics, and a notebook to document everything. I also brought something else, a small bag of tobacco. My grandmother was part Cherokee, and she'd taught me that tobacco was an offering of respect when dealing with spirits. I felt foolish carrying it, but something told me I might need it. I set up in a different location this time, on a rocky outcrop that gave me a clear view of the entire meadow. The night was overcast, making the darkness even deeper. Around 11 p.m., my equipment started acting up again. The electromagnetic interference was stronger this time, creating visible auroras in the southern sky, even though we were way too far south to see the northern lights naturally. That's when I heard the voice, not with my ears, in my head, a deep, resonant sound that seemed to come from inside my own thoughts. Diana. I nearly fell off the rock, and the voice knew my name. Somehow, impossibly, it knew my name. You see the patterns. You understand the signs. I looked around wildly, raising my rifle. Yes, I'd brought a gun this time, but there was nothing to shoot at. The voice was everywhere and nowhere. Then the visions started. I saw Tommy's school bus, the one he rode every morning, but something was wrong with the image. The bus was lying on its side in a ditch, broken glass everywhere. Children screaming. I could see Tommy trapped inside, calling for me. October 15th. Unless you listen. The vision changed. I saw the mine where my husband had died, but it was different somehow. Older equipment, different faces. Men I didn't recognize running toward exits that were collapsing behind them. 23 will die, unless you listen. Another vision. The silver bridge from the old newspaper stories, massive steel beams twisting and falling into the Ohio River. Cars dropping into the dark water like toys. We tried to warn them. They would not listen. Finally, I saw myself, standing in this same meadow, but older, gray hair, lines around my eyes, and beside me, clear as day, stood the creature, 8 feet tall with wings that stretched 15 feet on each side. The body was humanoid, but wrong somehow, too thin and angular. The face was almost human except for those burning red eyes that saw everything, knew everything. We are guardians. We watch for the cracks in time, the places where disaster bleeds through. I found my voice. What do you want from me? You have the sight. You can see the patterns we show you. Your people need a voice that will be believed. Why me? Because you love something worth saving. The image of Tommy's bus accident flashed through my mind again, and I understood. This thing, this Mothman, wasn't threatening my son. It was warning me about a future that could still be changed. When the visions ended, I was alone on the rock again, but I knew it was still out there, watching, waiting to see what I would do with the knowledge it had given me. I packed up my equipment with shaking hands. I had 2 weeks to figure out how to prevent my son's bus from crashing, and somehow, I knew that was just the beginning. The next few days were hell. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't think about anything except that vision of Tommy's bus accident. October 15th was 12 days away. I tried talking to the school principal about changing bus routes, but how do you explain that a supernatural creature showed you the future? I made up a story about seeing dangerous road conditions on Pine Valley Road, where the accident was supposed to happen. The principal listened politely but didn't take any action. I called the county transportation department and reported unsafe conditions on that stretch of road. They said they'd look into it but couldn't promise anything. Meanwhile, the visions kept coming. Every night when I closed my eyes, I saw disasters. The mine explosion with 23 dead, a small plane crashing into Seneca Rocks, a house fire that would kill an entire family if they didn't replace their faulty heater. The Mothman was trying to show me things that could still be prevented. But how was I supposed to convince people to take action based on supernatural warnings? Dr. Kevin Hayes, the park naturalist, noticed I wasn't acting right. Kevin was a good man, about 50 years old, with a PhD in biology and a healthy respect for things that couldn't be easily explained. "Diana, you look like you haven't slept in a week," he said, finding me in my office staring at calendars and trying to figure out warning schedules. I almost told him everything. Kevin had always been open-minded about the strange things we sometimes encountered in the forest. but I was afraid he'd think I was having a breakdown. "Just working on a difficult case," I said. Kevin sat down across from my desk. "The giant bird reports?" I nodded. "Wessa, want to talk about it?" Before I could answer, my radio crackled to life. It was Bob Collins, my supervisor. "Diana, we've got another sighting. Hiker named Jim Patterson saw your creature about an hour ago. Same area. He managed to get some pictures." Kevin and I drove up to meet Patterson at the ranger station. He was a young guy, maybe 25, with expensive hiking gear and a good camera. What he showed us made my blood freeze. The photographs were blurry, taken in dim light, but you could clearly see something massive and winged perched on a dead tree. The shape was wrong for any known bird. Too big, too angular. And those eyes, even in the poor quality photo, they glowed like red coals. "It just sat there watching me," Patterson said, his hands shaking as he held the camera. "Didn't move, didn't make a sound. Just stared. I felt like it was looking right into my soul." Kevin examined the photos carefully. "The proportions are all wrong for any native species. The wing structure doesn't match anything I know." "You think it's real?" I asked. Kevin looked at me strangely. "Diana, you're the expert on birds around here. What do you think?" I stared at the photograph, at those burning red eyes that I'd seen in person. "I think we need to investigate further." That evening, Kevin insisted on coming with me to the sighting area. I tried to talk him out of it, afraid of what might happen, but he wouldn't listen. "If there's an unknown species in our forest, we need to document it properly," he said. "This could be the discovery of a lifetime." We hiked up to Dolly Sods as the sun was setting. Kevin brought professional photography equipment and a portable generator to power floodlights. I brought my usual gear, plus that bag of tobacco my grandmother had told me about. The forest felt different that night. More electric, more alive. The aurora displays were strong, painting the sky in impossible greens and reds. All our equipment was acting erratic before we even reached the meadow. "I've never seen electromagnetic interference like this," Kevin muttered, watching his compass spin wildly. "It's like we're at the North Pole during a solar storm." We set up our equipment on the same rocky outcrop where I'd had my first real encounter with the creature. Kevin was excited, setting up cameras and light meters, but I felt sick with dread. Something bad was going to happen. I could feel it in the air. Around 10 p.m., Kevin's motion sensors started going off. We both grabbed our night vision scopes and scanned the tree line. It was there. Bigger than I'd remembered, darker than the darkness around it, sitting motionless on a dead oak tree about 200 yards away. "My God," Kevin whispered. "It's real." He started taking pictures, the camera flash lighting up the meadow in brief, brilliant bursts. Each flash revealed the creature in perfect detail, the massive wings, the humanoid torso, those burning red eyes that seemed to look right through us. "Kevin, stop," I said urgently. Something felt wrong. The air was getting thicker, more electric. But Kevin was too excited to listen. He kept shooting, kept moving closer to get better angles. That's when the visions hit me again. But this time they were different, more urgent. I saw Kevin, but he looked wrong, aged decades in seconds, his face frozen in an expression of absolute terror. He cannot know the future. Only the chosen can see and survive. The Mothman's voice filled my head, and I understood. Kevin was in terrible danger. "Kevin, we need to leave. Now." He looked back at me, confused. "Diana, this is incredible. We're documenting a completely unknown species." The creature suddenly spread its massive wings and took flight. Not like a bird. There was no flapping, no sound. It just rose into the air like gravity didn't apply to it. Kevin kept taking pictures as it flew directly toward us. The thing was huge, at least 15 feet from wingtip to wingtip, and it moved with impossible silence and grace. "Kevin, run!" I screamed, but it was too late. The Mothman passed directly over Kevin's head, maybe 10 feet up. I saw Kevin's face change in that instant. His expression shifted from excitement to pure, mindless terror. He aged. Right in front of my eyes, Kevin's hair turned white. Lines appeared on his face, his back bent as if under enormous weight. He dropped his camera and fell to his knees, making sounds that weren't quite human anymore. I ran to him, but when I reached him, Kevin was gone. Not dead. Gone. The thing kneeling in the grass was ancient, withered, with eyes that had seen too much. It looked like Kevin might look if he lived to be 150. He saw too far forward. The human mind cannot hold so much future at once. The Mothman's voice was sad now, almost apologetic. Some knowledge is too heavy for mortals to carry. The thing that had been Kevin made a sound like wind through dry leaves, then simply stopped. When the rescue team found him 3 days later, they said he'd died of extreme old age. Heart failure. The official cause of death listed his age as approximately 90 to 100 years, even though Kevin Hayes was 52 years old. I never told anyone what really happened that night. Who would believe me? But I learned something important. The Mothman's knowledge came with a price. It could show you the future, but seeing too much at once could destroy your mind. Kevin's death changed everything for me. I realized this wasn't just about preventing disasters. It was about choosing who could handle the truth and who needed to be protected from it. And I was running out of time to save my son. October 15th was 3 days away, and I still hadn't found a way to prevent Tommy's bus accident. The school wouldn't change routes, the county wouldn't fix the road, and I was afraid that if I tried to keep Tommy home that day, something else would happen to hurt him. The Mothman hadn't appeared to me since Kevin's death, but I could feel it watching, waiting. The electromagnetic disturbances were getting stronger, affecting equipment all over the county. The local power company was getting dozens of calls about flickering lights and radio interference. Then on October 12th, everything changed. I was at my ranger station when 3 black SUVs pulled up outside. Men in dark suits got out, the kind of men who looked like they could make problems disappear. Government types. Their leader was a thin man with gray hair and cold eyes who introduced himself as Agent Morrison from a federal task force studying atmospheric anomalies. "Ranger Blackthorne," he said, sitting across from my desk without being invited. "We understand you've been investigating unusual wildlife sightings in this area." "I investigate all wildlife reports," I said carefully, "including 8-foot-tall flying creatures with glowing eyes." My blood ran cold. They knew. Somehow they knew about the Mothman. Agent Morrison leaned forward. "We know about your encounters, Ranger Blackthorne. We know about Dr. Hayes's unfortunate accident, and we know you've been in contact with the entity." "I don't know what you're talking about." He smiled, but it wasn't friendly. "We've been tracking these creatures for decades. Point Pleasant in 1967, Chernobyl in 1986. Always appearing before major disasters, always choosing one local person to serve as their messenger." He pulled out a file and opened it on my desk. Inside were photographs, surveillance shots of me at the Dolly Sod site, night vision images of the Mothman, and copies of Kevin's aged corpse. "The entity has selected you," Morrison continued. "It's been feeding you information about future disasters. The question is, are you going to cooperate with us, or are you going to continue protecting it? What do you want?" "We want the creature, alive if possible, dead if necessary. These entities represent a significant threat to national security. Their ability to predict and potentially cause disasters makes them extremely dangerous." I thought about the visions I'd been shown. The mine explosion that would kill 23 people. The plane crash, the house fire, Tommy's bus accident. The Mothman wasn't causing these disasters. It was trying to prevent them. "What if you're wrong?" I asked. "What if it's trying to help?" Morrison's expression hardened. "That's not your decision to make. You're going to help us capture it, or we're going to arrest you as an accomplice to Dr. Hayes's death." He stood up and headed for the door, then paused. "Oh, and Ranger Blackthorne? Your son rides bus number 47, doesn't he? Pine Valley Road route? It would be a shame if that bus had mechanical problems." The threat was clear. Help them capture the Mothman, or watch my son die in 3 days. That night, I drove up to Dolly Sod's alone. I needed to warn the Mothman about the government agents, and I needed to find out if there was any other way to save Tommy. The creature was waiting for me in the meadow, standing in the open this time instead of hiding in the trees. Up close, it was even more imposing. 8 feet tall, with wings that scraped the ground when folded. But somehow, I wasn't afraid anymore. They cannot capture us, the voice said in my mind. We exist partially outside your time, but they can hurt you. They can hurt your child. Can you save him? Can you prevent the accident without me helping those agents? The future has many branches. In most of them, your son lives. But in all of those branches, you must choose to trust us completely. What do you mean? Become our partner. Accept the gift of sight. Help us prevent all the disasters, not just the one that threatens your family. The Mothman spread its wings, and suddenly I was surrounded by visions. I saw the Mine E explosion happening in real time. Men screaming, tunnels collapsing, families waiting at home who would never see their loved ones again. I saw the plane crash, the house fire, dozens of other tragedies that could be prevented if someone would just listen to the warnings. We cannot speak directly to your people. They fear us too much. But you can be our voice. You can warn them in ways they will accept. What's the price? I asked. Kevin saw too much, and it killed him. Kevin tried to take all knowledge at once. You will learn gradually. See only what you need to see. The human mind can adapt to our sight if it is done slowly. I thought about Agent Morrison's threat, about Tommy's bus crashing in 3 days, about all those people who would die if no one warned them. If I say yes, can you guarantee Tommy will be safe? If you say yes, you will have the power to keep him safe yourself. You will see the dangers before they happen. You will become guardian of your people, as we are guardians of time itself. I closed my eyes and made the choice that would change my life forever. Yes. The moment I said it, everything changed. Knowledge flooded into my mind, not overwhelming like what had killed Kevin, but steady and manageable. I could see the accident on Pine Valley Road, but I could also see exactly how to prevent it. A phone call to the right person, a tree that needed to be removed, a mechanic who needed to check the bus brakes one more time. I could see Agent Morrison and his team setting up their equipment to capture the Mothman, and I could see how to turn their own trap against them. Now you understand, the creature said. We do not cause disasters. We see the cracks in time where they will happen, but we need partners in your world to seal those cracks. What happens to the government agents? They will learn that some things are more powerful than their weapons, but they will not be harmed unless they try to harm us first. I spent the rest of the night making phone calls. The county road supervisor agreed to remove a dead tree that was about to fall across Pine Valley Road. The school maintenance chief discovered a brake fluid leak that needed immediate repair. The bus driver called in sick with a convenient case of food poisoning. By the time Agent Morrison's team arrived at Dolly Sod's the next evening, I was ready for them. I led them to the meadow and watched them set up their equipment, electromagnetic pulse devices, nets, tranquilizer guns. Where is it? Morrison demanded. It'll be here, I promised. And it was. The Mothman appeared exactly where I knew it would, hovering 50 feet above the meadow. Morrison's team immediately started shooting. Tranquilizer darts, net cannons, some kind of electromagnetic pulse beam. Nothing touched it. The Mothman existed partially outside normal space, remember? The weapons passed right through it like it was made of mist. But the creature's response was very real. It landed among the agents, moving faster than anything that large should have been able to move. Not hurting them, just showing them what true power looked like. 3 of the agents aged rapidly, just like Kevin had, but not fatally. They just got old enough to understand how small and brief human life really is. Agent Morrison found himself face to face with something that could see through time itself. The last thing he said before his hair turned white was, "We're not in control of anything, are we?" When it was over, the surviving agents packed up their equipment and left. They filed a report classifying the Dolly Sods incident as a natural atmospheric phenomenon. The Mothman Project was quietly shut down. That was 40 years ago. I'm 71 now, and I've prevented more disasters than I can count. The mine explosion that would have killed 23 people was stopped by an anonymous tip about dangerous gas levels. The plane crash was avoided when the pilot dead to delay his flight due to mechanical concerns. The house fire never happened because a family got a mysterious phone call telling them to check their heater. I became the voice the Mothman needed, the person who could translate supernatural warnings into terms people would accept and act on. Tommy is 52 now with children of his own. He never knew how close he came to dying on that school bus. Sometimes I think he suspects something. He's inherited a bit of the sight, though not as strongly as I have. His daughter shows signs of it too. The Mothman still comes to me when there's work to be done. Not as often as it used to. I think there are others now, people like me, in different parts of the world, serving as bridges between human understanding and supernatural knowledge. I left the Ranger Service in 1990 and started working as a safety consultant for mining companies, construction projects, and transportation departments. I never tell them about the visions. Just phrase my warnings as professional concerns based on my extensive experience with risk assessment. Most people listen. The smart ones, anyway. The government still watches sometimes. I see their surveillance teams parked on country roads, monitoring electromagnetic disturbances, waiting for another chance to capture something they'll never understand. But they're careful now. They learned that some forces are too big to control. Kevin Hayes was the only person who ever died from direct contact with the Mothman while I was involved. I think about him sometimes, wonder if there was another way to save him. But he chose to see too much, too fast. Some knowledge comes with a price, and not everyone is willing to pay it gradually. The strangest part is how normal it all feels now. Having supernatural visions, preventing disasters that most people never know were coming, working with creatures that exist outside of time. It's just my job. My calling. Tommy sometimes asks me why I never remarried, why I chose to live alone in the mountains. How do I explain that I'm never really alone? That I share my life with guardians from another dimension who trust me to protect the people they can't directly help? Last week, I got a vision of a bridge collapse in Ohio, familiar-looking bridge. I made some calls, talked to some engineers about unusual stress patterns I'd noticed in similar structures. The bridge will be closed for inspection next month. 46 people won't die this time. The Mothman's shadow still falls across these mountains, but it's not a shadow of fear anymore. It's protection, a warning that someone is watching, someone is listening, someone cares enough to try to change the future. And sometimes, late at night when the electromagnetic storms dance across the southern sky, I spread my arms wide and imagine what it would be like to fly through time itself, seeing all the possible futures spreading out like branches of an infinite tree. Some people are chosen to see those branches. Some people are chosen to help decide which ones become real. My name is Diana Blackthorne, and this is the story of how I learned to prevent tomorrow's disasters by listening to yesterday's warnings from creatures that exist in the spaces between seconds. The Mothman is still out there, still watching, still warning, and I'm still listening. My name is Catherine Ironfeather, and I've been a park ranger for 11 years. People always look surprised when I tell them that. Maybe it's because I'm the only woman ranger in this part of Tennessee, or maybe it's because I don't look like what they expect. I'm Cherokee, and I know these mountains better than most people know their own backyard. Wolf Mountain has always been my favorite place to work. It's wild and beautiful, with thick forests that have been growing for hundreds of years. The trees are so tall and close together that sometimes it feels like walking through a green tunnel. Most tourists stick to the easy trails, but I know every cave, every stream, every hidden valley in these 8,000 acres. That November started out normal enough. The leaves had already fallen, making the forest floor crunch under my boots. Winter was coming early that year. I could feel it in the way the wind cut through the trees, sharp and mean. The weather forecast said we might get snow before Thanksgiving. I was checking on the camping areas when my radio crackled to life. "Catherine, you there?" It was my boss, Jim Reynolds. "I'm here, Jim. What's up?" "Got a call from the wildlife agency. They want you to look into something weird up on Wolf Mountain. Some farmer's been losing cattle." I frowned. Bears sometimes went after livestock, but it was getting late in the season for that. They should be getting ready to sleep for winter, not hunting cattle. "How many cattle?" I asked. 15 in the last 3 weeks, and Catherine. They said it's not normal. The way they were killed, I mean. Something cold settled in my stomach that had nothing to do with the November wind. "I'll head up there tomorrow morning." "Be careful," Jim said, "and take someone with you if you can." But I knew I'd be going alone. The other rangers were busy with their own areas, and anyway, I worked better by myself. I knew how to track animals, how to read signs in the dirt and on trees. I'd moved 23 problem bears without anyone getting hurt. I'd tracked mountain lions back to their dens and helped move them somewhere safe. This couldn't be much different. That night I sat in my cabin and looked at the medicine bundle my grandmother had given me before she died last year. It was wrapped in old leather and tied with sinew. She'd told me it would protect me, that it held power from our ancestors. I'd always respected our Cherokee stories and traditions, but I was also a scientist. I believed in facts and evidence, not old legends about monsters in the woods. Still, something made me slip the bundle into my jacket pocket the next morning. The drive up Wolf Mountain took 40 minutes on winding roads that got narrower and bumpier as I climbed higher. The farmer who'd lost the cattle met me at his gate. His name was Bob Jenkins, and he looked like he hadn't slept in weeks. "I've been farming here for 30 years, he said, leading me toward his pasture. "Never seen anything like this." The first thing I noticed was the smell. It wasn't just the normal smell of death. This was something else, something that made my nose burn and my eyes water. The second thing I noticed was how quiet it was. No birds, no insects, nothing. Even the wind seemed to die down as we got closer to where the cattle had been killed. "Here," Bob said, pointing to a spot near the tree line. I'd seen plenty of animal kills before, but this made my stomach turn over. The cow hadn't just been killed, it had been torn apart and arranged in a pattern. Its organs were laid out in a circle around the body, and there were claw marks in the ground that looked almost like symbols. "What kind of animal does this?" Bob asked. I knelt down to look closer. The claw marks were deep, at least 8 inches long, and there were 4 of them side by side. They looked burned into the ground, as if the claws had been red hot. On the trees nearby, I found more marks, some of them 50 feet off the ground. "I don't know," I admitted, and that scared me more than I wanted to let on. I spent the next 3 days collecting evidence and trying to make sense of what I was seeing. My equipment kept acting up. The camera would take blurry pictures for no reason, and my radio would crackle with static whenever I got near the kill sites. Even my radiation detector was giving me readings that shouldn't have been possible. The pattern was always the same. Cattle torn apart with surgical precision, organs arranged in circles, claw marks burned into the ground, and that terrible smell that made me gag and gave me headaches. On Thursday, I met with Ezekiel Crowfeather. He was an old Cherokee man who lived alone in a cabin about 5 miles from the attacks. People called him crazy, but I'd always respected him. He knew stories that went back generations. "You shouldn't be up there alone," he told me as soon as he saw me, "especially not now." "Why? What do you know about what's been killing those cattle?" Ezekiel's face went dark. "It's not what. It's who." He poured himself a cup of coffee with hands that shook just a little. "You know the story of the Wampus Beast?" I did. Every Cherokee child knew that story. Long ago, a woman named Iwa had been turned into a monster as punishment for spying on a sacred ceremony that only men were allowed to attend. She became a creature that was half woman, half cat, with burning eyes and claws of fire. "That's just a legend," I said. "Is it?" Ezekiel looked at me hard. "These killings happen every 30 years, girl. Always in November. Always on Wolf Mountain. I've been keeping track. You're saying a monster from a 200-year-old story is killing cattle? I'm saying you need to be careful, and you need to stay away from Wolf Mountain after dark. I wanted to laugh, but something in his voice stopped me. Instead, I thanked him and drove back toward the mountain. It was getting dark by the time I reached the tree line, and I should have turned around and gone home. But I needed more evidence. I needed to understand what was really happening. I parked my truck and hiked about a mile into the forest, following the trail of damaged trees and strange markings. My flashlight beam danced ahead of me, making shadows jump and move. The silence was complete. No owls, no rustling in the bushes, nothing. That's when I heard the scream. It came from somewhere ahead of me, up the mountain. Not an animal scream. This sounded almost human, but wrong somehow, like a woman's voice mixed with the cry of a wildcat. The sound made every hair on my body stand up. Then I saw the eyes. They were about 50 yards away, glowing yellow-green in the darkness, too big to be a normal animal and too high off the ground. As I watched, they moved closer, and I could make out a shape. It walked on two legs like a person, but it was too tall, maybe 7 feet, and it moved wrong, too fast and smooth, like it was flowing instead of walking. My grandmother's medicine bundle felt warm against my chest. The thing stopped about 20 feet away from me. In the beam of my flashlight, I could see it clearly for just a moment. It had the basic shape of a woman, but covered in dark fur. Its hands ended in claws that seemed to glow with their own light, and its face was almost human, but the eyes were too large and too bright. And when it opened its mouth, I saw teeth like a big cat's. Then it spoke to me, not with its mouth, but directly into my mind. You know who I am. I stumbled backward, my heart hammering so hard I thought it might burst. The thing, the wampus beast, I had to accept that's what it was, tilted its head like it was studying me. You have Cherokee blood, you understand. This isn't real, I whispered. I am Iwa. I was made into this for seeking knowledge that was forbidden to women. Now I take my revenge on those who would keep us silent. The temperature around me seemed to drop 20 degrees in seconds. My breath came out in white puffs. The men who come to my mountain die. All of them. But you are different. I wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't work. I could only stand there, shaking, as this impossible creature looked at me with eyes like burning coals. There are others coming, she said in my mind. Young men who think they can conquer these mountains. I will hunt them as I have hunted for nearly 200 years. Then she was gone, not fading away, not running, just gone, like she'd never been there at all. But the smell remained, and the unnatural cold, and the complete silence of a forest that was afraid. I ran back to my truck, stumbling and falling in the dark, not caring about anything except getting away from that mountain. When I finally got home, I called Jim and told him I needed backup. I couldn't do this alone anymore, but even as I said it, I knew no one would believe me if I told them the truth. How could I explain that a Cherokee legend had come to life? How could I tell anyone that a creature from our oldest stories was real and hunting on Wolf Mountain? All I could do was try to keep people away from the mountain and hope that somehow this nightmare would end. The next morning brought news that made my blood run cold. 3 teenage boys from Knoxville had gone camping on Wolf Mountain 2 days ago and hadn't come back. Their parents had called the Park Service, and now there was going to be a search and rescue operation. I met with the rescue team at sunrise. 6 men, all experienced outdoorsmen, led by my colleague Pete Martinez. Pete was a good ranger and a friend. He'd helped me track bears before, and he knew the mountains almost as well as I did. We'll split up to cover more ground, Pete said, spreading a map on the hood of his truck. Catherine, you take the north trail. We'll work our way up from the south. I wanted to tell them not to go. I wanted to explain about Iwa and the danger that was waiting for them on the mountain. But how could I? They'd think I'd lost my mind. Pete, I said, maybe we should stick together. There's something strange going on up there. He looked at me with concern. You okay? You look like you didn't sleep. I'm fine. I just think it's safer if we stay in groups. Don't worry, we all have radios. If anyone finds anything or gets in trouble, we'll call for help. I watched them drive up the mountain road, and my stomach twisted with worry. The medicine bundle in my pocket felt heavier than it should have, like it was trying to tell me something. I hiked up the north trail looking for any sign of the missing boys. About 2 miles in, I found their campsite. The tent was still standing, but their sleeping bags were torn to pieces and scattered around like a tornado had hit. There was blood on the ground, but not enough to mean anyone was dead, at least I hope not. The strange claw marks were everywhere, on trees, in the dirt, even on rocks. They formed patterns that looked almost like Cherokee writing, but not quite, like someone was trying to write our language but didn't quite remember how. My radio crackled. "Catherine, you there?" It was Pete, but his voice sounded wrong, shaky, and scared. "I'm here. What's your location?" "About 3 miles up the main trail. Catherine, you need to see this." "What is it?" Static filled the radio for a long moment. Then Pete's voice came back, barely a whisper. "Just come. Come now." I ran down the mountain toward Pete's location, my heart pounding. The forest seemed darker than it should have been for late morning, and that unnatural silence hung over everything like a blanket. I found Pete standing in a small clearing, staring up at the trees. The other 5 men from Tiraz, his rescue team, were there too, hanging from the branches 20 feet above us. They were all dead, their bodies marked with those same burning claw marks I'd seen on the cattle. Pete turned to look at me, and his face was white as paper. "What kind of animal can do this?" he whispered. Before I could answer, we heard it. That same inhuman scream I'd heard the night before. It echoed through the forest, seeming to come from everywhere at once. "We need to get out of here," I said, grabbing Pete's arm. But it was too late. She came through the trees like a shadow made solid, moving faster than anything that size should be able to move. Pete tried to run, but Ewa caught him before he'd gone 5 steps. Her claws went through his chest like it was made of paper, and his scream cut off in a wet, choking sound. I stood frozen as she held Pete up in front of her, his blood dripping onto the ground. Her yellow eyes looked at me over his body. "This one came to take what belongs to me," her voice said in my mind. "They all come thinking they can conquer the mountain. They die for their arrogance. Please," I whispered, "let him go. He is already dead. But you I will spare. You understand what it means to be denied, to be told you cannot have what should be yours." Pete's body went limp in her grip. She tossed him aside like he weighed nothing. "The young ones are still alive," Ewa continued. "Hidden in the deep caves where no rescue will find them. They serve as bait." "Bait for what?" "For more men to come looking, more to pay for the sins of those who came before." The temperature dropped again, and snow began to fall even though the sky had been clear moments before. The flakes came down thick and fast until I could barely see 10 feet in any direction. "Winter comes early to my mountain," Ewa said. "No one leaves until I've finished my work." Then she was gone again, leaving me alone with Pete's body and the 5 dead rescue workers hanging in the trees above. The snow kept falling, harder and harder, until the forest became a white maze where every direction looked the same. I tried my radio, but it was just static. The storm had cut me off from the outside world, just like Ewa wanted. I was trapped on Wolf Mountain with a creature that had been killing for 200 years. And somewhere in the caves, 3 teenage boys were waiting to die. The medicine bundle in my pocket felt warm against my skin, and for the first time, I began to understand that maybe my grandmother's old stories weren't just legends after all. I spent the next 2 hours wandering through the blizzard, trying to find shelter and figure out what to do. The snow was falling so thick I could barely see my own hands. It was like the mountain had been swallowed by winter in the span of minutes. Finally, I found the mouth of a cave system I'd never seen before, even though I'd hiked these trails for years. It was hidden behind a curtain of hanging vines, and the opening was so narrow I had to squeeze through sideways. Inside, the cave opened up into a huge chamber. My flashlight beam showed walls covered in claw marks that definitely formed Cherokee symbols. I could read some of them: revenge, betrayal, justice. And everywhere, scattered across the floor, were bones. Animal bones, but human bones too. Some of them looked old, really old. Others looked fresh. That's when I heard the voices. "Help! Please, help us!" I followed the sound deeper into the cave system, through passages that twisted and turned like a maze. The air got warmer as I went deeper, and there was a strange reddish light coming from somewhere ahead. I found the boys in a circular chamber at the very heart of the cave system. They were alive, but barely. Two of them were conscious: Jake Morrison, who looked about 16, and his friend Danny. The third boy was hurt bad, unconscious and breathing funny. "Are you here to rescue us?" Jake asked. His voice was hoarse, like he'd been screaming. "I'm going to try," I said. But even as I said it, I could hear movement in the tunnels behind us. She was coming. "You found them." Iwa's voice filled my mind as her shape emerged from the darkness. In the red light of the cave, she looked even more terrifying than before. Her fur was black as night, her claws glowed like hot coals, and her eyes held the fury of 2 centuries. "Let them go," I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. "They're just kids. They are males. They came to my mountain thinking they could take what they wanted, like all the others. They made a mistake. They didn't know. Ignorance is no excuse." She moved closer, and I could feel heat coming off her body like she was burning from the inside. "Do you know what they did to me, Catherine Ironfeather? Do you know why I became this?" And suddenly I did know. Not just the story I'd heard as a child, but the real truth. Images flooded my mind. A Cherokee woman named Iwa, curious and brave, who wanted to learn the sacred ceremonies that were forbidden to women. She'd hidden herself and watched the men's ritual, seeking knowledge that was denied to her because of her gender. When they caught her, they didn't just banish her or punish her. They performed a ceremony that bound her spirit to the form of a beast, trapping her between human and animal, making her a monster. They told the story as if she'd been punished for breaking a sacred law, but the truth was uglier. They'd been afraid of a woman who wanted to be their equal. "Now you understand," Iwa said. "For nearly 200 years I have wandered these mountains, neither human nor animal, unable to rest, unable to die. Every November, when the moon is dark, the hunger comes. The need for revenge." "I understand," I said, and I meant it. "But these boys aren't the ones who hurt you. Killing them won't bring you peace." "Peace?" Her laugh was like breaking glass. "There is no peace for me, only the endless hunger." That's when I remembered what my grandmother had told me about the medicine bundle. Not just that it would protect me, but that it contained something special. A ceremony that had been passed down through the women of our family for generations. "There might be another way," I said. Iwa's eyes narrowed. "What way?" I reached into my jacket and pulled out the leather bundle. As soon as my fingers touched it, the cave filled with a soft white light that made Iwa step back with a hiss. "The ceremony that made you wasn't completed properly," I said, the knowledge flowing into me like water. "That's why you're trapped. But it can be finished. You can be set free." "You would do this? Knowing what I am, what I've done?" "You were wronged," I said. "Not just by being punished, but by being denied the knowledge you sought. I can complete the ceremony. I can give you what you were looking for 200 years ago." For the first time since I'd met her, Iwa looked uncertain. Hope flickered in those burning eyes, and for a moment I could see the woman she'd been before the curse. "What must I do?" "You have to trust me, and you have to let go of the anger. The ceremony was complex and dangerous. I had to draw symbols on the cave floor with ash from the sacred fire that burned in the bundle's center. I had to speak words in Cherokee that I'd never learned but somehow knew. And most importantly, I had to open my mind to Iwa completely, letting her share not just her memories, but her pain. It was like being struck by lightning, made of pure emotion. 200 years of rage and loneliness and betrayal crashed through me all at once. I felt what it was like to be transformed against your will, to be trapped in a form that wasn't yours, to hunger for revenge against people who were long dead. But I also felt what she'd been like before, curious, brave, wanting nothing more than to learn and grow and be accepted as equal to the men of Taund, her tribe. I remember, Iwa whispered as the ceremony reached its peak. I remember who I was. The light from the medicine bundle grew brighter and brighter until the whole cave was blazing white. I felt something inside Iwa breaking, not breaking like destruction, but like chains being cut away. When the light faded, she was still there. But the rage was gone from her eyes, replaced by something that looked like peace. Thank you, she said. And this time I could hear her voice with my ears instead of just in my mind. It sounded like a regular woman's voice, gentle and tired. Are you free now? I am. Her form was already becoming translucent. The boys will be safe. The killing will stop. What will happen to you? I will rest. Finally, I will rest. She faded away like morning mist, leaving behind only a sense of peace and the faint scent of mountain flowers. The blizzard stopped as suddenly as it had started. Within minutes, the unnatural snow was melting and running away in little streams. I helped the two conscious boys carry their injured friend out of the cave system, and we made it back to the trailhead just as the real rescue teams arrived. Jake Morrison died in the helicopter on the way to the hospital. His internal injuries were too severe. But Danny and the third boy, whose name was Chris, survived. They never talked about what they'd seen in that cave, and I never asked them to. I reported the deaths as bear attacks. It wasn't true, but it was a truth people could accept. The official report said that an unusually aggressive black bear had killed the rescue workers and injured the camping boys during an early winter feeding frenzy. The cave system where I'd found the boys collapsed naturally a few days later, sealing away all the evidence of what had really happened. People accepted the bear story because it made sense to them. Wild animals were dangerous, especially when winter came early and their normal food sources were scarce. It was a tragedy, but a normal kind of tragedy that fit into the world they understood. But I knew the truth, and the truth had changed me. The scars across my chest where Iwa had marked me during the ceremony never fully healed. They itch when supernatural things are near, like an early warning system. I've learned to trust that feeling. I still work as a ranger on Wolf Mountain, but my job is different now. I'm not just protecting the forest from people and people from the forest. I'm watching for signs of other things, other stories that might be more than stories, other legends that might need to be set right. The Cherokee have many tales about creatures and spirits that live in these mountains. Most of them are just stories told around fires to teach lessons or entertain children, but some of them might be as real as Iwa was. My grandmother's medicine bundle was completely burned up in the ceremony that freed Iwa's spirit. But before it turned to ash, it passed something to me, knowledge of other rituals, other ways to help lost spirits find peace. I'm not sure why I was chosen to carry this responsibility, but I've accepted it. Last month, I got reports of strange lights dancing through the forest near Raven Creek. Lights that move like they're alive, that lead hikers off the safe trails and into dangerous areas where they can fall or get lost. The Cherokee have a story about spirit lights that guide the dead to the other world, but sometimes capture the living by mistake. I'm going to investigate those lights next week. Part of me is scared. I'll always be scared of the supernatural things that hide in these mountains. But part of me is also grateful. Iwa taught me that sometimes the monsters we fear are just people who were hurt so badly they couldn't find their way back to being human. My job now is to help them remember who they used to be. The mountains are quiet these days. The unnatural silence that used to hang over Wolf Mount, Ayan, is gone, replaced by the normal sounds of a healthy forest. Birds sing, squirrels chatter, deer crash through the underbrush. It's the way it should be. But sometimes, when I'm hiking, alone on the high trails, I catch the scent of mountain flowers where no flowers grow. And sometimes, just for a moment, I think I see a woman-shaped shadow moving through the trees, not threatening or angry, just watching, making sure everything stays peaceful on her mountain. I like to think it's Iwa, finally at rest, but still keeping an eye on the place that was her prison for so long, protecting it in a different way now, with love instead of rage. The Cherokees say that every mountain has a spirit, and that spirit reflects the emotions of those who live there. For 200 years, Wolf Mountain's spirit was twisted by anger and pain. Now it's healing, slowly becoming what it was always meant to be. And me, I'm healing too. The nightmares have mostly stopped. I sleep better knowing that one lost soul has found peace, but I stay alert because I know there are other spirits out there, other stories waiting to be resolved. My name is Catherine Ironfeather, and I'm a park ranger. But I'm also something else now, a bridge between the world of facts and evidence that I was trained for, and the older world of spirits and stories that my grandmother knew. It's not an easy job, but it's mine, and I'll do it as long as the mountains need me to. The dead deserve peace, the living deserve protection, and sometimes, if you're lucky and brave enough, you can give both. My name is Marcus Redstone, and I've been a park ranger for 19 years. I've seen a lot of things in these Virginia mountains. Bears that could tear a man apart, wildcats that move like shadows, crazy people hiding in caves. But nothing, and I mean nothing, prepared me for what happened during the ice storm of February 1983. I was 44 years old then, working the Mount Rogers National Recreation Area. It's the highest peak in Virginia, covered in thick forests and hidden valleys where a man could disappear forever. Most folks avoid it in winter, especially when the weather turns nasty. Smart folks, anyway. The storm hit us hard on a Tuesday morning. Ice started falling like bullets, coating everything in a shell so thick you couldn't break it with a hammer. Power lines snapped like guitar strings. Trees crashed down across every road leading out of the mountains. By noon, I was trapped up there with no radio, no phone, and no way to call for help. That's when I got the message about the Hartman family. Tom Bradley, a state trooper, had driven up just before the worst of it hit. He looked worried, more worried than I'd ever seen him. Tom was tough as nails, the kind of cop who didn't scare easy. "Marcus," he said, stamping ice off his boots in my cabin, "we got a real bad situation up at the Hartman place. Family of 4, all dead." "Bear attack?" I asked. It wouldn't be the first time. Black bears could get mean when they were hungry. "I don't know what the hell it was." Tom shook his head. "But it wasn't no bear I ever saw. The cabin's torn apart from the inside. Claw marks on the ceiling 12 feet up. Blood everywhere." I packed my gear. Rifle, first aid kit, rope, flares. Military stuff I'd learned to trust in Vietnam. The Hartman cabin was 5 miles up a winding trail, but with all the fallen trees, it might as well have been 50. "I'll check it. Out when this storm passes," I told Tom. "No," he said, looking out at the falling ice. "Roads are going to be blocked for a week. If something's still out there, it could hit other families before we can get help up here." He was right. There were maybe 20 cabins scattered through these mountains, most of them with families who had nowhere to run. Tom left before the worst hit, promising to send backup as soon as the roads cleared. I figured I'd wait it out, then take a look at the Hartman place in a day or two. I should have gone right away. That first night, everything went quiet. I mean, dead quiet. You know how snow and ice can muffle sounds, but this was different. I couldn't hear wind, couldn't hear the creek running behind my cabin, couldn't even hear my own breathing sometimes. Around midnight, I heard something moving outside. Heavy footsteps crunching through the ice. But they were wrong somehow. Too far apart. Like whatever was making them had legs twice as long as a man's. I looked out my window but couldn't see anything in the darkness. The footsteps circled my cabin 3 times, then stopped right outside my front door. I waited with my rifle ready, but nothing happened. After an hour, I figured it was just a bear looking for food. But when I checked in the morning, I found tracks in the frozen snow. They were the biggest footprints I'd ever seen. 22 inches long, with 5 toes ending in claws. The stride between them was impossible, almost 10 feet from one print to the next. No bear made tracks like that. No animal I knew could step that far. That's when I knew the Hartman family hadn't been killed by anything normal. I reached the Hartman cabin on the second day, and I wished to God I'd never seen it. The front door was hanging off its hinges. The windows were smashed outward, like something inside had exploded. But that wasn't the worst part. Ciao. The worst part was the silence. Every animal for miles around had left. No birds, no squirrels. Even the bugs were gone. It was like the whole forest was holding its breath. I went inside, with my rifle ready. The cabin looked like a tornado had hit it, but tornadoes don't leave claw marks. Deep gouges ran along the walls, some of them 8 feet off the ground. Furniture was smashed to pieces. Blood was everywhere. On the walls, the ceiling, pooled on the floor. I found what was left of John Hartman in the kitchen. He'd been a big man, maybe 200 pounds of farm muscle. Whatever killed him had picked him up and thrown him against the wall so hard it cracked the logs. Mary Hartman was in the bedroom, along with their 2 boys, ages 8 and 10. I won't describe what I found there. Some things a man shouldn't have to see, let alone talk about. But the youngest boy, little Sarah, was still breathing when I found her under the bed. "Help me," she whispered, her voice so quiet I almost missed it. I got her out and tried to stop the bleeding. She was torn up bad, but alive. As I worked on her, she grabbed my arm with a grip stronger than a dying child should have. "It talked like people," she said, her eyes wide with terror. "The hairy giant. It had red eyes and smelled like rotten meat, and it talked like people." "What did it say, honey?" It said it was hungry, and that winter made it hungry." She coughed, and blood came up. "It said there were more of them, a whole family." Those were the last words she ever spoke. I buried the Hartman family behind their cabin, saying prayers I'd learned as a boy. The ground was frozen solid, so it took me most of the day. While I worked, I kept feeling like something was watching me from the trees. When I finished, I studied those giant tracks around the cabin. They led into the forest toward the old cave system that ran through the mountain, but there were other tracks too, smaller ones, but still bigger than any human foot. At least 3 different creatures had been here. Maybe a family, like Les Monges, Sarah said. I followed the tracks as far as I dared. They led to a wall of twisted trees, oaks and maples bent into impossible shapes, their branches woven together like a fence. It was maybe 20 feet high and ran in both directions as far as I could see. Something had marked its territory, and I was standing right at the edge of it. That night, back at my cabin, I heard voices calling my name. "Marcus," they said. "Marcus, come out. We need you." But they weren't human voices. They were the voices of my old army buddies, guys who'd died in Vietnam 10 years ago. Bobby Martinez, who stepped on a mine outside Da Nang. Jimmy Chen, who took a sniper's bullet meant for me. "Marcus, don't leave us out here in the cold." I knew it wasn't them. Couldn't be them. But hearing their voices made my hands shake and my chest tight, just like the old days when the nightmares were bad. Whatever had killed the Hartman family was smart. Smart enough to know what would hurt me most. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw little Sarah's face and heard my dead friends calling from the darkness. By morning, I knew I was dealing with something that had been watching people for a long time, learning how to hurt them in ways that went deeper than claws and teeth. The storm was getting worse, and I was running out of food. But I couldn't leave. Not with those things still out there. Not when they'd started calling my name. On the third day, I found the deer. 12 of them, arranged in a perfect circle in a clearing about a mile from my cabin. They'd been killed clean. No struggle, no scattered blood. Just 12 dead deer laid out like the points of a clock, all their heads pointing toward the center. In the middle of the circle was a human skull, old one, maybe from the Civil War days. Someone had carved symbols into the bone, marks I didn't recognize, but that made my skin crawl just looking at them. This wasn't random killing, this was a message. I was taking pictures with my old camera when I heard branches breaking behind me. I spun, around with my rifle up, but nothing was there. Just shadows between the trees that seemed to move when I wasn't looking directly at them. "I know you're watching," I called out. "What do you want?" The answer came in Bobby Martinez's voice, echoing from all around me. "We want you to come home, Marcus. Come home where it's warm." But Bobby was dead. Had been dead for 10 years. I backed away from the deer circle, keeping my rifle ready. The shadows followed me, staying just out of sight. Every few steps, I'd hear another voice. Jimmy Chen, asking why I'd let him die. Tommy Rodriguez, wondering why I got to come home when he didn't. They were voices from my nightmares, the ones that woke me up screaming. Somehow, these creatures knew about them. They were inside my head, digging up my worst memories. I made it back to the main trail and started toward the cave system. If these things had a den, that's where it would be. The tracks led that way, and I needed to know what I was dealing with. The entrance to the caves was hidden behind a curtain of ice-covered vines. The opening was big, maybe 8 feet tall and 12 feet wide, big enough for something huge to walk through without ducking. I lit a flare and went inside. The cave went deep into the mountain, branching off in different directions. The walls were covered in more of those carved symbols, thousands of them stretching back into the darkness. Some looked fresh, others were old enough to be covered in moss. I followed the main tunnel, using my flare to light the way. The air stank of death and something else, something wild and animal, but wrong, like a zoo cage that hadn't been cleaned in years. After maybe 100 yards, I found the nest. It was a huge chamber, big enough to hold a house. The floor was covered in bones. Animal bones, mostly, but some that looked human. Old ones and new ones all mixed together. In the center was a pile of animal skins and pine branches, arranged like a giant bed. This was where they slept. I was taking pictures when my flare started to fade. In the growing darkness, I heard movement from deeper in the cave. Heavy breathing, the sound of something big shifting around. Then I heard little Sarah's voice, weak and scared. "Help me, mister. I'm still alive. They took me. Please help me." But Sarah was dead. I'd buried her myself. "Please," her voice said from the darkness. "I'm hurt. I can't move." I knew it was a trap. Knew that whatever was back there was using her voice to lure me deeper. But hearing that little girl's voice, even knowing it was fake, almost broke me. I lit my last flare and started backing toward the entrance. That's when I saw them. 3 pairs of red eyes watching me from the shadows. Huge shapes that had to be 10 feet tall or more. They didn't move, just watched as I backed away. But when I reached the cave entrance, one of them spoke in my own voice. "You can't leave, Marcus. We know where you live. We know where your family lives." That stopped me cold. My new wife, Janet, and her 2 kids were safe in town, 30 miles away. But these things seemed to know everything about me. "We've been to your house," my own voice said from the cave. "We've looked in the windows. The little boy sleeps with a teddy bear. The girl has a pink room." I fired 3 shots into the darkness, the sound echoing through the cave like thunder. The red eyes disappeared, but I could hear them laughing. It sounded like wind through broken glass. I ran back to my cabin, crashing through ice and fallen branches. Behind me, I could hear them following, not chasing, just keeping pace. Like cats playing with a mouse. That night, they surrounded my cabin. I could hear them walking around outside, sometimes on 2 legs, sometimes on 4. He'd scratch at the walls and tap on the windows, and they'd talk. They used Janet's voice telling me she was scared and needed me to come home. They used my stepson's voice crying for help. They used my stepdaughter's voice asking why I'd abandoned them. By dawn, I knew I had to make a choice. I could try to wait for rescue, hoping they'd lose interest. Or I could do what I'd trained for in the Army, take the fight to the enemy. Problem was, I wasn't sure these things could die, and I was almost out of ammunition. Tom Bradley came back on the 4th day, just like he'd promised. I heard his truck struggling up the trail around noon, engine whining as it pushed through the ice and fallen branches. I was so relieved to see another human being that I almost cried. But when Tom got out of his truck, I could see something was wrong. His face was pale, and his hands were shaking. "Jesus, Marcus," he said, looking around at the claw marks on my cabin walls. "What the hell happened here?" "Same thing that got the Hartmans," I said. "Only worse. There's a family of them, Tom. 3 of them, living in the caves." Tom nodded, but he kept looking over his shoulder at the tree line. "I saw the tracks coming up. Biggest damn footprints I ever saw." He paused. "And I heard voices. Voices of people I know. People who aren't here. So it wasn't just me. These things had been messing with Tom, too." "We need to get out of here," Tom said. "Right now. I've got a radio in the truck. We can call for backup, maybe get a hunting party together." But as we walked toward his truck, I heard Janet's voice calling from the forest. "Marcus, help me! They took me! I'm hurt!" Tom heard it too. His hand went to his gun. "That's not possible," he whispered. "Your wife's safe in town. I talked to her this morning." Then we heard my stepson. "Dad, where are you? I'm scared." And my stepdaughter. "Please help us, Marcus. It's dark and we can't find our way." Tom raised his rifle toward the sound, but there was nothing to shoot at. Just voices coming from everywhere and nowhere. "It's a trick," I told him. "They learn voices. They use them against you." But Tom was already walking toward the tree line, his face blank and strange. "Tom," I grabbed his arm, "don't listen to them." He turned to look at me, and his eyes were different, like he was looking through me instead of at me. "They need help," he said in a voice that wasn't quite his own. "We have to help them." That's when I realized these things could do more than just mimic voices. They could get inside your head, make you believe things that weren't true. Tom walked into the forest before I could stop him. I followed, calling his name, but he moved like he was sleepwalking. The voices kept calling. Janet, my stepchildren, people I cared about, all begging for help from somewhere in the dark trees. I found Tom's body 20 minutes later, hanging from a tree branch 15 feet off the ground. His neck was broken, but there were claw marks on his chest deep enough to reach his ribs. The creatures had used him as bait, and I'd walked right into their trap. I cut Tom down and laid him on the ground. As I was checking his body, I found something in his jacket pocket, a small mirror, the kind women carry in their purses. That gave me an idea. Back at my cabin, I gathered everything I had that could reflect light, the mirror from my shaving kit, the chrome bumper from Tom's truck, even the shiny surface of a cooking pot. I remembered something from the old stories. Creatures like this, they didn't like daylight. Maybe bright light could hurt them. I also had 3 military flares left, the kind that burn white hot for 10 minutes, and 1 full clip for my rifle. It wasn't much, but it was all I had. As the sun went down, they came for me. The first one appeared at the edge of the tree line, a massive shape walking on 2 legs, maybe 11 feet tall and covered in dark hair. Its eyes glowed, red in the darkness, and when it opened its mouth, I could see teeth like broken glass. "Hello, Marcus," it said in Janet's voice. "I've been waiting for you." 2 more shapes stepped out of the forest, smaller but still huge. A female and a young one, maybe 7 feet tall. They moved like a family, staying close together. "We know you're alone now," the big one said, still using Janet's voice. "Your friend can't help you anymore." I lit my first flare and held it up. The white light made them step back, hissing like giant cats. "That's right," I said. "You don't like light, do you?" The big one laughed, and now it was using my own voice. "Light only lasts so long, Marcus, but we're very patient." They started circling my cabin, staying just outside the flare's light. I could hear them talking to each other in low growls that weren't quite animal sounds, planning something. When the flare burned out, they moved closer. I lit the second one and smashed the cabin window, holding the flare outside. The light reflected off the ice-covered trees, creating a web of brightness that made them back off again. But I could see them getting ready to rush me. The big one was tensing up, ready to leap. That's when I made my move. I threw the second flare as far as I could and ran toward Tom's truck. The keys were still in it, and the engine turned over on the third try. I gunned it toward the main trail, hoping to get far enough away to radio for help. But they were faster than any truck could go through ice and fallen trees. The big one jumped onto the truck's roof, its claws scraping through the metal like paper. The whole vehicle tilted under its weight. I could hear it tearing at the roof, trying to get inside. I slammed on the brakes and grabbed my rifle. The creature flew forward, rolling across the hood and landing in front of the truck. For a second, it was caught in the headlight beams. I got my first clear look at it. It was like a man, but wrong. Too tall, too wide, covered in dark hair that looked almost black in the light. Its face was human enough to be horrible. Intelligent eyes, a mouth full of broken teeth, hands with fingers too long and claws too sharp. But the worst part was that it looked sad, ancient and tired and hungry. "You killed my friend," I said, aiming the rifle at its chest. "He came into our territory," it said in Tom's voice now. "Same as you. Same as the family in the cabin. This isn't your territory. This is my mountains. My job to protect people here." The creature tilted its head, like it was thinking. "We were here first, before your people, before your roads and cabins. We were here when this mountain was young." Maybe that was true. Maybe these things were older than anything I could understand. But that didn't give them the right to kill families. I fired 3 shots into its chest. The bullets hit. I could see them hit. But it just staggered back a step and looked down at the wounds like they were bug bites. Then it smiled. "Our turn," it said. The other 2 came out of the forest, one on each side of the truck. I was trapped between them. I lit my last flare and held it high. The white light made all 3 of them stop, but they didn't back away this time. They just waited, like they knew the flare wouldn't last forever. That's when I remembered the mirror in Tom's pocket. I angled it to catch the flare light and reflect it back at the big creature's face. The beam hit its eyes, and it screamed, a sound like breaking glass mixed with a wildcat's roar. It stumbled backward, covering its face with hands the size of dinner plates. The other 2 rushed me. I dove back into the truck and floored it, driving straight at the smaller female. She jumped aside, but not fast enough. The truck's front bumper caught her leg, and I heard bones snap. The young one leaped onto the truck bed, trying to crawl through the back window. I could feel its weight shifting the truck as it moved. I drove to the cliff road, the one that led up to the radio tower. If I could get high enough, maybe I could signal for help. The truck slipped and slid on the ice, but the 4-wheel drive held. Behind me, I could hear the big creature following, its footsteps pounding like thunder. The young one finally broke through the rear window, its claws reaching for my head. I grabbed Tom's nightstick from the dashboard and swung it backward, catching the creature in the face. It let go and tumbled out of the truck. I made it to the cliff road before the engine died. The radiator was cracked, steam pouring out into the cold air. I was maybe 200 yards from the radio tower, but it might as well have been 200 miles. The big creature appeared in front of the truck, breathing hard but not even winded. Behind it, the other 2 were limping up the road. The female was dragging her broken leg, but still coming. I got out of the truck with the mirror and Tom's cigarette lighter. It wasn't much, but it was all I had left. "You fight well for a human," the big one said, using my father's voice now. "But this ends here." "Yeah," I said, "it does." I held up the mirror and caught the moonlight, reflecting it into its eyes. It was weaker than the flare, but still bright enough to make it flinch. While it was distracted, I poured gasoline from Tom's emergency can onto the ground between us and lit it with the cigarette lighter. The fire roared to life, creating a wall of light that made all three creatures back away, hissing and snarling. "Fire," the big one said, and for the first time, it sounded afraid. Always fire. I kept feeding the fire with anything that would burn: branches, paper, even my spare clothes. The light pushed them back toward the forest, but I knew it wouldn't last long. When the gasoline burned out, they'd come for me. But as the fire began to die down, I heard something beautiful: the sound of helicopter rotors in the distance. The storm had finally broken. Help was coming. The creatures heard it too. They looked up at the sky, then at each other. The big one said something in that growling language, and all three of them started backing toward the tree line. "This isn't over," it said in my own voice. "We'll remember you." "Good," I said. "Remember what happens when you hurt innocent people." They disappeared into the forest just as the rescue helicopter appeared over the ridge. I spent 3 days in the hospital with frostbite and exhaustion. When the investigators asked me what happened, I told them it was a bear attack during the storm. They wrote it up as an animal incident and closed the case, but I kept the mirror, and I learned everything I could about those old stories, the ones about things that live in the deep woods, older than civilization, hungrier than anything natural. I retired from the Ranger Service and moved my family to Florida. But sometimes, on quiet nights, I still hear voices calling my name from the darkness. And sometimes I look in that mirror and wonder if they kept their promise to remember me. The Hartman cabin was never rebuilt. The cave entrance was sealed with concrete and steel bars. But I know that won't stop them forever. Some things are too old and too hungry to stay buried. All I can do is hope they stay in their territory, up in those deep mountains where decent people know better than to go. But if you ever find yourself in the Virginia mountains during a winter storm, and you hear voices calling your name from the darkness, voices of people you love, don't listen. And whatever you do, don't go looking for them, because they're not who you think they are, and they're always hungry. My name is Jesse Moonbranch, and I've been a park ranger for 16 years. I've seen a lot of strange things in these mountains, but nothing like what happened in Deep Creek Hollow, nothing that still wakes me up at night, sweating and checking the locks on my doors. It was late October when Sheriff Davis called me about the missing Patterson family. Mom, Dad, and twin girls, 10 years old. They'd been camping in the hollow for 3 days without checking in. Their car was still at the trailhead, keys locked inside. "Need your help, Jesse," Davis said over the radio. "You know that hollow better than anyone." I did know it. Deep Creek Hollow was 15 miles of old forest that stretched deep into the Blue Ridge Mountains. The locals called it cursed. Said ghost children roamed the woods at night looking for playmates. I'd grown up hearing those stories from my Cherokee grandmother, but I never believed them. In 16 years of ranger work, I'd completed 47 rescues without losing a single person. The drive to the trailhead took me an hour on winding mountain roads. October mist hung thick between the trees, and the first frost had turned the leaves bright orange and red. Everything was quiet except for the crunch of dead leaves under my boots. I found their campsite just before noon. The Pattersons had picked a spot near the old creek where the water ran cold and clear over smooth rocks. But something was wrong the moment I saw it. All their gear was there: tent, sleeping bags, cooking equipment, even the girls' stuffed animals. But everything was arranged in perfect circles around a cold fire pit. The parents' clothes were folded neat as a pin on one side. The twins' matching pink jackets were laid out on the other side, arms spread wide like invisible children were wearing them. I'd never seen anything like it in all my years as a ranger. "Hello?" I call, let out. "Patterson family?" Nothing. Not even an echo. The forest was dead quiet. No birds singing, no squirrels chattering, no insects buzzing, just the soft sound of water running over rocks. I pulled out my compass to check directions, but the needle spun in wild circles. My flashlight dimmed even though I'd put in fresh batteries that morning. The temperature felt 20 degrees colder than it should have been. I radioed back to Davis. Found their campsite. No sign of the family, but all their gear is here. Gear's there, but they're not. That's odd. More than odd, I said, looking at those empty clothes spread out like ghost children were wearing them. I'm going to search the area. Might lose radio contact in the hollow. Be careful, Jesse, and call in every hour. I clicked off the radio and started looking for tracks. The soft dirt around the creek showed plenty of footprints, adult boots and small sneakers. But there was something strange about the children's tracks. They were too light, like whoever made them weighed almost nothing. The tracks led away from camp and deeper into the hollow, following an old deer path through the trees. I'd walked this trail dozens of times, but today it felt different. Wrong somehow. As I walked, I thought about my own daughter, Emma. She was 8, just 2 years younger than the Patterson twins. After my divorce last month, I was fighting for custody. My ex-wife said I cared more about the mountains than my own family. Maybe she was right. But this job was all I knew how to do well. The tracks got fainter as I went deeper into the hollow. After about a mile, they disappeared completely at a rocky creek crossing. I stood there for a long time, looking at the dark water and listening to the silence. That's when I heard it, faint and far away, like it was coming from deep in the forest. Children laughing. The laughter stopped as soon as I tried to locate it. I stood perfectly still, holding my breath, but heard only the creek water running over stones. "Hello?" I called out. "Patterson girls? Sarah? Emma?" My voice echoed off the rocks and died away. Nothing answered back. I crossed the creek and kept following the old deer path. The trees grew thicker here, their branches blocking out most of the afternoon sun. Mist drifted between the trunks like smoke. About 2 miles from the campsite, I found something that made my skin crawl. A ring of 12 small stones, arranged in a perfect circle in a clearing. Each stone was about the size of a child's head, worn smooth by years of weather. In the center of the circle was a pile of rotting logs covered in moss and ferns. I'd never seen this place before, even after all my years working these mountains. I walked around the stone circle, careful not to step inside it. Something felt wrong about this place. The air was colder, and that weird silence pressed down like a heavy blanket. As I studied the stones, I noticed they weren't random rocks. They were markers, grave markers. I pushed aside the moss and rotting logs in the center of the circle. Underneath, I found what I was afraid I'd find. Old bones, small bones, children's bones, white with age. 12 graves. 12 children buried here long ago. My hands shook as I covered the bones back up. I'd found an old cemetery, hidden in the deepest part of the hollow. But why were kids buried way out here, miles from any town or church? The sun was getting low, casting long shadows through the trees. I needed to keep looking for the Patterson family, but this place made me want to get out fast. I took some photos with my camera and marked the location on my map. As I turned to leave, I heard footsteps behind me. I spun around, but the clearing was empty, just the stone circle and the covered graves. "Patterson family?" I called. "If you can hear me, stay where you are. I'm a park ranger. I'm here to help." The footsteps came again, light and quick like children running. But I, wouldn't see anyone. Then I heard singing. A child's voice, sweet and clear. "Ring around the rosy. Pocket full of posies. Ashes, ashes. We all fall down." The song seemed to come from everywhere at once, from the trees, from the ground, from the air itself. It echoed around the clearing, getting louder and louder until it filled my head. I backed away from the stone circle, my heart pounding. The singing followed me as I hurried down the trail toward the creek. I didn't stop until I reached the Patterson campsite. The sun was setting now, painting the sky orange and purple above the trees. I set up my emergency camp near their tent and tried to radio Sheriff Davis. Static. Nothing but static. I was on my own until morning. I made a small fire and ate a cold sandwich, trying to make sense of what I'd found. 12 children buried in the middle of nowhere. Strange tracks that were too light. Empty clothes arranged like invisible kids were wearing them. and that singing. As darkness fell, the temperature dropped fast. Frost started forming on the tent fabric and the sleeping bags. Way too cold for late October. That's when I heard them. Footsteps in the leaves around my camp. Soft, careful steps, like children trying to sneak up on someone. I grabbed my flashlight and swept it in a circle around the fire. Nothing there. But the footsteps kept coming, circling my camp just outside the reach of the firelight. Sometimes I heard whispers, too quiet to make out words. Sometimes I heard that song again, drifting through the trees. I added more wood to the fire and checked my rifle. I'd never shot at anything in these mountains except rattlesnakes, but something told me I might need it tonight. Around midnight, I saw them. Children, standing just at the edge of the firelight. 12 of them, ranging in age from about 6 to 12 years old. They wore old-fashioned cloth. Yes, long dresses for the girls, knickers and suspenders for the boys. Their skin was pale as milk, and their eyes were black holes in their faces. They didn't move. They just stood there, watching me. "Who are you?" I whispered. The oldest one, a girl with long dark hair, stepped forward. When she opened her mouth to speak, frost came out instead of words. "We're lonely," she said in a voice like wind through dead leaves. "We've been lonely for so long." "What do you want?" "Friends," she said. "We want friends to play with. Friends to stay with us forever." I reached for my rifle, but my hands were shaking so bad I could barely hold it. "The Patterson girls," I managed to say. "Where are they?" The ghost children looked at each other and smiled. Their teeth were black with decay. "Playing," the dark-haired girl said. "They're playing with us. Would you like to play too?" That's when I saw them. 2 more children behind the others, barely visible in the firelight. The Patterson twins, Sarah and Emma. But they looked wrong. Their skin was too pale, and they moved too slowly, like they were walking underwater. They were alive, but barely. "Let them go," I said, raising the rifle. The ghost children laughed, and the sound was like ice breaking on a frozen pond. "You can't hurt us," the dark-haired girl said. "We're already dead, but you're not. Not yet." The fire started to die down, even though I'd just added wood. The ghost children moved closer, their feet not quite touching the ground. I had to get out of there, had to get help. But as I turned to run, I realized something horrible. I couldn't remember which way led out of the hollow. The ghost children followed me as I stumbled through the forest, always staying just out of sight but never far away. I could hear them whispering to each other in voices like autumn wind, and sometimes one of them would giggle. My flashlight kept dimming no matter how many times I changed the batteries. The beam would flicker and fade, leaving me stumbling over roots and rocks in the darkness. I tried to follow the Cree back toward the trailhead, but the water seemed to twist and turn in ways that made no sense. Creeks don't change course overnight, but this one did. Every time I thought I knew where I was going, I'd find myself back at that stone circle with the 12 graves. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time felt strange in the hollow, like it was moving through thick mud. As I walked, I started seeing things that couldn't be there. A logging camp from the 1800s, with men cutting down massive trees, children playing in the dirt between rough wooden buildings, a woman hanging laundry on a line, humming to herself. But when I blinked, everything was gone. Just trees and darkness. "You're seeing the past," a voice said behind me. I turned and saw the dark-haired ghost girl walking beside me. Up close, I could see that half her face was rotted away, showing white bone underneath. "This is where we lived," she said, "before the sickness came." "What sickness?" "Typhoid. It killed all of us children in the logging camp. 12 of us died in 1 week. Our families couldn't afford proper burials, so they put us in the ground out here and tried to forget about us." I kept walking, trying to get away from her, but she stayed right beside me. "What's your name?" I asked. "Mary Beth. I was 11 when I died. That was in 1847. 1847, over 100 years ago." "The Patterson girls," I said. Where are they? Mary Beth pointed deeper into the hollow where the trees grew so thick they blocked out the stars. Safe with us. We take good care of our friends. We keep them in the sleeping place until they're ready to play forever. Ready for what? She smiled, and I saw that her teeth were just black holes in her gums. To become like us. To never be lonely again. That's when I understood. These ghost children weren't just playing with their victims. They were changing them. Turning them into ghosts, too. I started running. The forest seemed to fight me every step of the way. Branches grabbed at my clothes. Roots tried to trip me. The path kept changing direction, leading me in circles. Behind me, I could hear all 12 ghost children following. They didn't run. They floated just above the ground, their feet never touching the leaves. I ran until my lungs burned and my legs felt like rubber. When I finally stopped, gasping for breath, I found myself in another clearing I'd never seen before. This one had a cave entrance, black as a grave mouth in the hillside. The opening was just big enough for a person to crawl through. "They're in there," Mary Beth whispered right in my ear. I spun around, but she was gone. All the ghost children were gone. I pulled out my flashlight and crawled into the cave. The tunnel was narrow and cold, with walls that felt slimy under my hands. After about 20 feet, it opened up into a larger chamber. That's where I found them. The Patterson twins were lying on stone ledges, their eyes closed like they were sleeping. But their skin was pale as moonlight, and their breathing was so shallow I could barely see their chests moving. Next to them were 3 other children I didn't recognize. A boy about 9 years old, a girl maybe 12, and another boy who looked like he was 7. All of them had that same pale, barely alive look. "Sarah? Emma?" I whispered. One of the twins opened her eyes. They were starting to turn black like the ghost children's eyes. "Mister," she said in a voice like a whisper, "help us. We're so cold." I tried to pick her up, but she was heavier than she should have been, like the life was being drained out of her. "I'm going to get you out of here," I said. That's when I heard the laughter behind me. All 12 ghost children stood at the cave entrance, blocking my way out. Mary Beth was in front, and her eyes glowed like cold stars in the darkness. "You can't take them," she said. "They belong to us now, but we'll make you a deal." "What kind of deal?" "Your life for theirs. Stay with us, forever, and we'll let the sleeping children go." I looked at the Patterson twins, barely alive on their stone beds. Then I looked at the other 3 kids, probably from families who'd been reported missing over the years. "All of them?" I asked. "You'll let all 5 children go?" Mary Beth nodded. I thought about my own daughter Emma, safe at home with her mother. If these were her kids trapped in this cave, what would I want someone else to do? "Okay," I said. "I'll stay." Mary Beth smiled, but it wasn't a happy smile. "Liar," she said. The ghost children rushed toward me like a cold wind. The ghost children hit me like a wall of ice water. Their hands were so cold they burned, and wherever they touched me, frost spread across my skin. Mary Beth wrapped her arms around my chest, and I felt something terrible happening. She was pulling the warmth out of me, the life out of me, trying to drain me the same way they'd drained the other children. But I wasn't a child. I was a grown man who'd spent 16 years in these mountains, and I wasn't going to die easy. I remembered something my Cherokee grandmother had taught me when I was young. She'd told me that some spirits couldn't cross certain barriers, couldn't stand certain smells. I pulled out my emergency kit and found what I was looking for: a small bag of salt and some dried sage I used for starting fires. "Get back!" I shouted, throwing salt in a circle around myself and the sleeping children. The ghost children hissed like angry cats and backed away from the salt line. But they didn't leave. "That won't work forever," Mary Beth said. "You can't stay in that circle until morning, and even if you could, morning won't come. We control time in this place." She was right. I could already feel the salt circle getting weaker. The ghost children were testing it, pushing against it with their cold hands. I lit the sage with my lighter. The smoke filled the cave, and the ghost children backed away even more. But there wasn't much sage, and it wouldn't last long. "Why are you doing this?" I asked Mary Beth. "You were a child once. Don't you remember what it was like to be afraid?" Her face twisted with anger. "We were afraid when the sickness came," she said. "We were afraid when we died alone, with no one to hold our hands. We were afraid when they buried us in the ground like animals and forgot about us." "I'm not forgetting about you," I said. "I found your graves. I know what happened to you." "Then you know why we're lonely, why we need friends." "But you're hurting innocent children." Mary Beth laughed, and the sound made ice form on the cave walls. "Innocent? No one is innocent. Everyone forgets the dead. Everyone moves on and pretends we never existed." The sage was almost burned out. The salt circle was getting thinner. The sleeping children behind me were getting colder. I had to try something desperate. "What if I promised to remember you?" I said. "What if I promised to take care of your graves, to make sure people know what happened to you?" Mary Beth paused. "You would do that?" "Yes. I'll put proper markers on your graves. I'll tell people your story. You won't be forgotten anymore." The other ghost children whispered to each other in their dead voices. "And the sleeping children?" Mary Beth asked. "You let them go, all of them. And you stop taking new children. No more lonely kids disappearing in these woods." Mary Beth stared at me with those black hole eyes. For a moment I thought she might agree. Then she shook her head. "It's too late for promises," she said. "We've been dead too long. We've forgotten how to trust the living." The sage went out. The salt circle cracked. The ghost children rushed toward me again. But this time, something else happened. The sleeping children behind me started to wake up. They were weak and pale, but they were alive and they were angry. "Leave him alone!" shouted one of the Patterson twins. The ghost children stopped, confused. They weren't used to their victims fighting back. "We want to go home," said the other twin. "Home," whispered one of the other children. "Home," they all said together. Mary Beth screamed, and the sound cracked the stone walls of the cave. She was losing control of her prisoners, and she knew it. "No!" she shrieked. "You belong to us! You can't leave!" But the living children were standing up, holding hands, facing the ghost children together. "We want to go home," they said again, and their voices were stronger now. The ghost children started to fade, becoming more transparent. Their power was breaking. Mary Beth made one last desperate attempt. She lunged at me, her rotted hands reaching for my throat. But I was ready for her. I grabbed a handful of salt and threw it right in her face. She screamed and dissolved like smoke. The other ghost children faded away too, their voices echoing in the cave as they disappeared. "We'll find you," they whispered. "We'll always find you." Then they were gone. The cave shook, and rocks started falling from the ceiling. "Come on," I shouted to the children. "We have to get out of here." I grabbed the Patterson twins and helped them toward the cave entrance. The other 3 children followed, moving slowly but steadily. We crawled out of the collapsing cave just as the whole hillside came down behind us. We made it out of Deep Creek Hollow just as the sun was rising. The children were weak and confused, with no memory of what had happened to them. They thought they'd been lost in the woods for one night, not days or weeks or months. Sheriff Davis found us at the trailhead, along with search teams from 3 counties. The children were taken to the hospital where doctors couldn't explain why they were so pale and cold, but they all recovered. The other 3 children I'd found in the cave had been missing for years. Tommy Morrison, age 9, disappeared in 1963. Lisa Chen, 12, vanished in 1965. And little Billy Watson, 7, had been gone since 1964. Their families had given up hope long ago. I told everyone the same story. The children had gotten lost in a cave system and survived on water that dripped from the rocks. I'd found them just before the cave collapsed. No one questioned it too hard. They were just happy to have the kids back alive. But I knew the truth, and I kept my promise. I went back to the stone circle in the hollow, even though every step of the way made my skin crawl. I put proper markers on each of the 12 graves with names I'd found in old logging camp records. Mary Beth Connolly, age 11, Thomas Reed, age 8. Sarah Jane Murphy, age 6. All 12 children who died in the typhoid outbreak of 1847. I also put up signs around Deep Creek Hollow, warning people to stay away. Dangerous terrain, they said. Unstable caves. Most people listened. The experience changed me. My hair turned white almost overnight, and my hands are always cold now, like the ghost children's touch left a permanent mark. I look 20 years older than I should, but the Patterson twins and the other 3 children went home to their families. They're grown up now, living normal lives. Sometimes I get Christmas cards from them, though they never mention what really happened in the hollow. I never did get custody of my daughter Emma. My ex-wife said I'd been acting strange since the rescue, and maybe she was right. How do you explain to a family court judge that ghost children tried to steal your soul? But I still work as a ranger in these mountains, and every month I go back to that hidden cemetery in Deep Creek Hollow. I leave flowers on the graves and tell the children's spirits that someone remembers them. Most of the time the hollow is quiet now. Most of the time. But sometimes, especially on cold October nights when the mist rolls in thick between the trees, I still hear them. Faint laughter in the distance. Children singing that old song. Ring around the rosy. Pocket full of posies. Ashes, ashes. We all fall down. And I know they're still out there, waiting in the darkness. Waiting for someone to forget their promise. Waiting for new children to come play with them forever. That's why I'm telling you this story. So you'll know what's really out there in the deep woods. So you'll remember the 12 children who died forgotten in Deep Creek Hollow. And so you'll never, ever take your own children camping in places where the dead might still be walking. Because some promises are the only thing standing between the living and the hungry dark. And if I ever break mine, God help us all.